during my training, I joined in 55, did 2 years of intensive training, and then once you became qualified, we were required to give the Navy 7 years return of service. And my 7 years started in August, so I would have completed my 7-year return of service in August of 64.
Of the aircraft that you've actually flown while in the Fleet era, what would be a favourite and non-favourite?
Well, I had the good fortune to have some months off 816 Squadron. At some time early, it must have been around 60 or so. I spent a few months on 74, 75 Squadron, whichever it was, and there were 2 Seafarers and 2 Fireflies there that obviously weren't going to be around for much longer. And of course, the Sea Fury was the aeroplane, a 400-knot aeroplane with a big Bristol Centaurus engine, 5-bladed propeller that once you open the thrust lever and the supercharger kicked in on takeoff, you really got a kick in the back and you were airborne before you knew it. It was a fabulous aeroplane to fly just for the fun of flying. Fully aerobatic, highly manoeuvrable, high speed, powered aeroplane, but tricky near the ground, very tricky near the ground.
The tail dragger?
The tail dragger, and it was tricky because you had that vast 5-bladed propeller up front swirling the air around the fuselage and a very short tail rudder and tailplane, as you know. The tailplane tended to be shadowed by the fuselage so that you didn't have a real lot of rudder control at different speeds, so at particularly low speeds you had to be very careful.
So could you see out of it much at all?
You could see everything. It was a good bubble cockpit. You sat up with your shoulders just above coaming level, and for visual it was a good type of aeroplane for that type of. I did read, there is an interesting article on the internet written by Fred Lane, and Fred was on number 1 course, and he flew the Furies up in Sea Fury, up in Korea off Sydney, and he wrote an interesting article on it, that it wasn't a plane for that war, for various reasons that I won't go into, but just to fly it from Nowra as an aeroplane, it was the aeroplane of the time, and probably the best and most fun aeroplane I flew.
All right, so of course that was piston engine, right?
Piston engine.
And the Gannet as well, it was a little bit different concept altogether.
Well, the Gannet in those days was conceived to be a complicated, it wasn't a simple aeroplane because of its systems. It had the side-by-side twin-engine Armstrong Siddeley engines, not terribly reliable and pretty useless in the tropical areas, I have to say, having flown the aeroplane in the North Atlantic and then in the tropics, so it was quite a different aeroplane. But you had the side-by-side engine driving a coaxial twin-bladed aeroplane with the blades going in opposite directions. And of course that meant a lot of satellite gearing, which created mammoth problems hydraulically and compression-wise and the like, and did create quite a problem servicing and on reliability from time to time. But it was a pretty handy aeroplane. It was a good aeroplane in the North Atlantic in the cooler climate to fly for anti-submarine work, and to do a 3-hour patrol was no problem at all, because you'd fly around on the one engine and just swap engines every half an hour. But down in the tropics, it was a bit of a dog. We'd have to take it up to 3,000 foot, shut down an engine and slowly drift down over the next half an hour before swapping over engines, climbing up, and that's how we would conduct our patrols in the tropics. But this was typical of British aeroplanes being flown at the time. They were built for North Atlantic conditions, but then as soon as you bring them down to tropical areas, their performance wasn't as grand.
Maintenance-wise on the Gannets?
Gannet, complicated, difficult, demanding, and particularly on the carrier, when you're in the South Tasman Sea with the ship moving in its rock and roll, with the back end of the ship doing a corkscrew, trying to do a double engine change in the hangar of a night time was a challenge, and I observed many of them.
So did you transfer eventually to Venoms and Vampires?
I eventually flew those aeroplanes. I didn't transfer to them, but at a period of about 1962 or 63, I must have got enough time off on 725 Squadron to give myself a jet conversion, and I did a mini sort of a night fighter course on the Venom, because I wanted to fly this aeroplane because these fighter pilots used to be spruiking about the aeroplane that they couldn't fly in the tropics in nil wind conditions because we couldn't get enough wind across the deck. But they were the blood of the Navy, if you listen to them. The Firefly, a great old machine. The routine was, before the jet era, was pilots would come off course after having flown the Wirraway, which was a demanding tailwheel aeroplane, but then they couldn't go straight into Fury because it was even more difficult to fly. So they would do a Firefly course for about 10 or 15 hours to get used to the heavy piston technique and the like, because the Firefly was a gentle and controllable aeroplane on and near the ground before going to the Sea Fury. In my case, I went to the squadron, and my first heavy piston flight was in the Sea Fury, and I came back to the Firefly later and did another 50 hours in that. I got 50 hours in the Sea Fury and 50 hours in the Firefly, but I did it the reverse way, and I must say it was a challenge getting into the Sea Fury before, because the noise and the propeller and the stuff that you're used to generally, but the tail wheel operation and the characteristics of the Sea Fury made it an interesting first 2 or 3 hours to fly.
I was just thinking about piston engines and blades, and then you go from that, things in front of your face, to jet aircraft, you know, and there's a different, is that a different concept of flying or nothing?
The flying jets is easy. You've got no torque problems.
Yeah.
You've got plenty of power there, normally, depending on the aeroplane you're flying, and certainly in the more advanced jets that the Royal Navy had and that the Yanks were putting out at the time. Once they put more oomph in the blowpipe, that really changed the concept of flying completely.
Yeah, I remember.
And the trick was never to lose engine revs and never to get low and slow.
Fair enough.
In jet aircraft, and particularly modern jet aircraft.
Yeah. All right, so those aircraft that relate to what we've got in the museum, for instance, that you've flown, what would be a favourite, if such?
Or undoubtedly the most enjoyable was the Sea Fury.
Sea Fury.
But in many ways, I just enjoyed flying aeroplanes because, as you probably noticed in my logbook, at any one time, I think I pointed out on a couple of days there, I flew five different types, from jet engines to propeller to multi-DC-3. So I just used to fly anything that was available. But I enjoyed all of them because of their different characteristics.
And you told me that you've flown our C-47 type aircraft. How'd you find that?
Oh, the old DC-3 was a great old aeroplane because we had two of them, and we could go and spend 2 or 3 hours in it training observers or doing work with the radar operators off Sydney, training them. And so it was easy to convert to the DC-3, piston engines, familiar with it, a tailwheel aeroplane, very, very familiar with it, and you could fly in the right-hand seat for hours and hours until you were confident enough by the CA to put you in the left-hand seat, and then slowly build up your experience in the left-hand seat. And I eventually, the Navy used to send a lot of their pilots down to RAAF Sale to do a DC-3 conversion, whereas I just did a local one at Nowra with the CA upping my performance factors as we went along, and eventually I went up to Sydney in the DC-3 and did a few ILSs to get rid of it, to get the instrument rating that was required. So I became fully qualified on that at the end too.
I've got to ask you about takeoff and landing of a carrier. Now, how scary?
Not scary. It's a very thoughtful process, but it's a process that pilots have been doing for years and years. And by the time I got to the gunnet and the deck, the way to do it had been worked out pretty well completely. The interesting thing was, as I said, the Venoms lots of times up in the Far East couldn't fly because the carrier could only give us about 70 knots off the booster, and the carrier itself could only give us about 25 knots, really eating its heart out and burning the heart out of the boilers to give us 25 knots. So that was giving us just over 90 knots, and the Gannet needed 92 knots to get off so we could get off, but the Venom needed 102, 103 knots. So in nil wind conditions in the tropics, the Venoms couldn't fly, but we could always fly. But with the carrier wound up like a watch and going as hard as it could in nil wind conditions. But the technique was, if you think about it, taxiing around on the deck you had to be very careful, but the marshallers were very, very well trained, and they worked within inches of the propellers. They'd be standing out just in front of you, 5 or 6 feet away from the propellers, marshalling you into position. First of all, on the catapult, they'd have the chocks up, and you'd come up onto the chocks, and you'd hit those, and then they'd put the tie down on, they'd put the strop on, that was on the catapult on the deck, they'd put that up on the aeroplane, and then you'd have a whole back strop also from time to time, or you'd sit there on and ready. The flight deck officer would be just down there to your right hand side, lower right. He would have a green light from Fryco. He would look ahead, he would check the green light, and he'd look at you, and by that time he'd pushed both engines forward and he'd be winding you up. And when you gave him the chop, you're on your way, whether you liked it or not. And when you gave the chop, you grabbed the pole, put your elbow into your gut and just braced there, and boom, you're off. And I had the occasion to be standing by the flight deck officer one day, and Shorty Rowlands won a number 1 course. All of these boys had moved off the Gannet and had gone to the old Sycamore helicopter, but in my early days as a sub-lieutenant, they were still there. And Shorty Rowlands was up there one day launching up in the Far East, and he gives the chop, and then the flight deck officer does his check, drops the flag, and then Shorty starts going, no, 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 no. He lost an engine there, and off he went and into the water.
Into the water.
But waving his hands wasn't smart. He should have really raced because the aeroplane could really go up, and you could stall it in, but he was going to end up in the water anyway. But that instant, there's only probably 10 or 15 seconds when that engine could have failed, and it did at that time. After the flag had dropped and before the engineer in the little housing down below deck just punched the button and the steam hit the catapult.
But he got out of that, I gather.
Oh yeah. Ditching the Gannet wasn't a big problem. We had several of them, and because they were big and strong, flat and healthy, and up there in the South China Sea, it's usually like just zipping it on glass.
Yes,
very seldom did they ever break up the Gannet.